So if you haven't yet heard, there's a new Guardians of the Galaxy video game. It was developed by Eidos Montreal, published by Square Enix, and released on October 21st of last year. But I didn't get a chance to play it until a couple of weeks ago. This isn't going to be a proper review of the game, so I'll give you a 30-second version of that. This game is fantastic. You should play it for yourself if you can. Apologies if you don't have a next-gen console. Don't play it on Switch. I give it a 9 out of 10. I played every minute of it, and I have very few complaints. It probably would have been my game of the year if I had played it in time. Whoops. And as I was playing it, I found myself smiling a lot, because the more I played it, the more I realized this is a Dungeons & Dragons video game. And you know what? It's the best one I've ever played. So I'm going to assume that you know what a video game is, but in case you've never played Dungeons & Dragons, allow me to explain it as plainly as possible. D&D is one part combat and one part role-playing. Combat is battling monsters, and role-playing is everything else. Character building, lore building, player characters interacting with non-playable characters, even sometimes just goofing around in the fantasy world that you've created. And at the end of the day, it's a lot of talking. The narrative to break up the battle sequences. As far as officially licensed Dungeons & Dragons video games goes, there's quite a few of those. Neverwinter, Baldur's Gate, Dark Alliance, Tales from Candlekeep, Chronicles of Mystara, Icewind Dale, Planescape Torment. If you've played any of these games, those were Dungeons & Dragons video games. I've played quite a few of these games, and none of them quite get it. Don't get me wrong, some of them are genuinely fantastic video games, and they definitely make me feel like I'm playing a video game based off of Dungeons & Dragons, and my knowledge of the actual tabletop games certainly enhanced my enjoyment of them a bit here and there, but at the end of the day, they're just video games, and they don't give me the very unique enjoyment I get sitting down to actually play D&D. Extremely recently, I said this about the new Dark Alliance. I think Dungeons & Dragons Dark Alliance is the best D&D game they've ever made. Whoops, now it's this one. Now, Guardians of the Galaxy obviously isn't a licensed D&D video game like the others I mentioned, but it is so obviously heavily influenced by Dungeons & Dragons that it might as well be. If an interview with the dev team came out where the dev team admitted to playing a lot of D&D in their free time, and that influenced how they developed this game, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Spoilers for Guardians of the Galaxy from here on out. So let's start with the obvious stuff. If you saw the E3 2021 trailer for this game, then you probably saw this guy.
We should have gone to Mako 4.
Yes, that's correct. That is the one and only gelatinous cube, a common enemy amongst D&D campaigns and a staple of the franchise. You've probably seen one before, if not in this game, then in Pixar's Onward. They're also in Minecraft, even though in that game they're called slimes, and I'm pretty sure they're only shaped like cubes because that game was intentionally made to look like it was developed for the Nintendo 64, even though it came out in 2011. Battling in games has a lot of different terms, but one I found that's unique to Dungeons & Dragons is the word encounter. Simply put, you encounter an enemy or group of enemies, and now you must fight them or figure out a way to not fight them. I don't think I've ever seen a video game refer to battling as encounters, but this one does. And the comparisons do not stop there. Encounters and everything that isn't encounters have different mechanics. Some you can't do in battle and vice versa. In battle, Star-Lord acts as both the player character and the dungeon master. You only play as Star-Lord, but every battle sees Gamora, Drax, Rocket Raccoon, and Groot fighting alongside you. They do just as good on their own as any other AI-controlled video game companion, but each of them has a meter with 4 individual special moves that they'll use only if you tell them to. So you have to strategize and carefully plan out when to use them. In Dungeons & Dragons, all talking amongst players virtually stops when an encounter starts, and same goes for Guardians. Speaking of characters talking, Guardians of the Galaxy, released on October 21st, 2021, is 1 part combat and 1 part talking. There are, of course, other mechanics like puzzle solving, exploration, and platforming, but the 2 core mechanics, the mechanics that matter, are combat and talking. Just like with D&D, talking is everything that has to do with narrative. Character building, lore building, goofing around, but most importantly, decision making. Frequently, while playing Guardians of the Galaxy, you'll be asked a question that always has 3 responses, 2 opposing responses, with a third option to stay out of it completely. Some of these decisions are actually important and have specific implications on the story. This game is like Life is Strange meets Final Fantasy 15. So just like in D&D, because the game puts so much weight on your decisions, it makes characters talking to each other just as enjoyable as battling. Not to mention, these characters never shut up, but I honestly prefer that. Every conversation is interesting and has that Guardians of the Galaxy charm that we've all become accustomed to. When I play video games, I like to also listen to music or a podcast, but I couldn't do that with this game because someone was always saying something, and I didn't want to miss anything. And speaking of music, this game has 70s and 80s music just like the movies, which makes you feel like you're playing a game of D&D, and you put your own music on in the background. While I was playing, almost every new enemy type reminded me of an enemy you see in Dungeons & Dragons. I'll put some examples on screen now. The only big one missing that I couldn't find a stand-in for was the Beholder. But, you fight an actual dragon in this game. It's not an alien that looks like a dragon either, it's a dragon. Not to mention that the Guardians themselves already fall in line with typical D&D classes, something that's already been pointed out before on the internet, but I think this even extends to the supporting and non-playable characters in this game as well. At the end of the day, is Guardians of the Galaxy a Dungeons & Dragons game? No, at least not officially. If you like video games and Dungeons & Dragons, you gotta check this one out. As I'm writing this, I'm realizing that it's kind of difficult to put into words, just because there's a dragon and a gelatinous cube doesn't automatically make it a D&D game, but it's the way these characters interact, it's how you control them, it's the important and interesting conversations to break up battle-heavy gameplay. All these game development decisions combine to make an enjoyable and satisfying video game experience that also just so happened to remind me of Dungeons & Dragons. The last thing I wanted to talk about is one of the first things that happens in the game. You play as Peter as a kid, you have a conversation with your mom, she leaves and tells you to join her downstairs, and you're left to explore Peter's room. And sitting on his desk, waiting for you to interact with them, is a full set of Dungeons & Dragons dice.
3 natural ones in a row last game? Some barn I turned out to be.
Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe.
Our channel has daily uploads from podcast video essays, Let's Plays to skits.
Be sure to watch on Twitch. We stream all our video game and podcast content live at 5 EST every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday.
Our intro is by Brad Kendrick and music by Froggy and the Friendship. Link to all that in the description below.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.